James Cargo Motorcycle Shipping sponsors Under the Visor.
I'm Anne and
I'm Anthony.
And we are known as the Two Slow Speeds because there are two of us. We are slow and our name is Speed.
We set off in June 2014 on a round-the-world trip which took us 15 months. Took us out through Europe, Russia, down through the Stans, across Iran, India to Southeast Asia, and then because we couldn't take the bikes back to Australia, we shipped them to Santiago in Chile and then rode up through South America, Central America, North America and back to the UK.
I suddenly had a feeling that we should spend some time with our families. My parents are in their early 90s, Anthony's mum was ageing, and I had this strong feeling that we should go back and spend some time there. So we thought, okay, let's pack up and go to Europe for 9 months. And then we just got a single ticket to Europe with no return. And we're trying to think of how we'd get back to Australia, and somehow we thought of motorbikes. And we thought, well, we could go back on motorbikes for some reason. We still, to this day, cannot remember whose idea it was.
Yeah, so nobody can take the credit, nobody can take the blame. We started at the Birmingham Motorcycle Show with 2 pairs of motorcycle boots, because one of the challenges when you decide to do around the world or go back to Australia when you're somewhere else, you don't have anything, so you have to completely equip yourself. We bought 2 motorbikes, equipped them, prepared to set off to Australia, and then found we couldn't take the bikes back to Australia. We decided to choose 2 identical bikes to make both riding for both of us possible on either bike and reduce spares and parts that we might need to take. There were not too many bikes in the sort of frame we were looking for, so we ended up trying the Triumph and the BMW, so the Triumph 800 and the BMW 7800s, and we settled on the F700 GS.
Yes, the reason for that was they were a bit lower for me. I wanted to go, I knew we'd be doing some off-road, which I'm not that comfortable with, so I felt that I needed both feet on the ground. So the F700 GS turned out to be the lowest one. I found it very comfortable. I bought some risers just to bring the handlebars a bit closer, and it was a perfect setup for me.
The memory we have is of the people we met. I think that's one of the great things about travel, that we hear so many stories, but when you get to meet the people in the countries, the friendships we've made that continue to this day in a number of countries that we want to go back to, that for us is the one thing that stands out. There's beautiful scenery, there's great riding, we have some roads we would love to go back and do, but at the end of the day, if we have to pick one thing, it's the people.
And people did things for us, helped us along the way, knowing full well that we had absolutely no way of ever being able to repay them. It was purely generosity of heart, and that's really what touched us. Oh, even tiny things like inviting us in a petrol station in Kazakhstan, I think it was. He invited us in to his petrol station, huge open space. There was a table, there was just the springs of a bed. He found plastic chairs. He brought a watermelon, broke it in 2, cut it up with a knife. He found 2 mugs, which he cleaned with his fingers, and gave us a cup of tea, and brought us a piece of bread that he'd baked that morning, and we spent an hour there chatting with him. He didn't speak English. I understood a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of Russian, but we spent an hour chatting. And it was pure generosity and love on his part. And for why, you know? A place we left in Uzbekistan, we had met his daughter in a restaurant. She invited us back. He had never met a foreigner before, so we chatted. He couldn't understand why his daughter wanted to live in America. Now he's meeting foreigners. We spent a couple of evenings with him. When we left, he said, "Part of my heart goes with you."
It changed,
to me, that's
changed his perception of foreigners. So, and it was a great experience for us, and we want to go back and see them. You know, they're asking us, when are we coming back? That's been one of the things people say, when are you coming back to this town in India or South America, or when are we going to see you again?
Mostly the difficulties were in my head. I was building up, because I didn't have that much experience on dirt, building up, being scared about what was going to happen, and it never was quite as bad as it was. So my head is what gave me the most trouble. Eventually I got into it and I was fine. And I did have problems with my bike. It would die on me as I'm overtaking a truck on a hairpin bend, and the whole thing would die. And that happened for 6 months before we found the problem. In Colombia one day, as we're going over the passes, it died on me 200 times. That was a little bit stressful at times, and you know, riding on motorways, and it dies on you when you're overtaking and you have to slowly creep back. But otherwise it was fine.
I think the best bit is we've enjoyed doing things together. You know, we used to windsurf, and we'd windsurf together side by side across a bay. So
screaming in the wind.
Being out there and enjoying it, and knowing you're both enjoying exactly the same experience, whereas I think, you know, a rider and pillion get different experiences. We're both going over the same roads. I don't think we had a worse bit, but it's always, you have to keep the other person in mind. You know, you can negotiate between two trucks, but can the person behind you, you're thinking of that if you're leading. We found we're more disconnected in the 4x4 from our environment and from people. With the bike, you're exposed to the elements, you're part of the environment. When you're in a vehicle, you have windows, you have air conditioning, you're separated.
You don't talk to the locals as much because you are separated. And we both felt, when we've got the luxury of the air conditioning because we've travelled in 40-degree heat, so that's been nice. But we've really missed that connection with, we don't feel the wind in the hair even though it's hot, but the connection with the people is what we're missing the most.
We were riding, we did it our first, after returning to riding after some 30 years, we did an organised trip on Royal Enfield, starting in India, going through all the way through Bhutan and back into India. And I had been unwell with a chest infection on about the 5th day. While riding down this mountain pass, my chest infection got a lot worse. And it continued to trouble me for about 10 days, but we continued the journey, went back to Australia, I went to work, I went to see my GP to get some antibiotics for my chest infection. But his diagnostic things were a lot better, and he determined that, along with a specialist the next day, that I'd had a heart attack, I had a blocked artery, and required a quadruple bypass 3 days later. When we set off to travel, one of the things we wanted to do is communicate, and one of the challenges today is there's so many ways. You know, there's Facebook and there's Twitter and emails, and we thought, let's have a single way of communicating with family and friends. It's purely designed to keep, you know, people in contact. And Anne came up with our blog name, which is Two Slow Speeds, because there's two of us, we're slow, and our surname is Speed. And in that, we've ended up documenting our trip, and we've also put such things as border crossings, because we wanted to give something back to people. We've learned a lot from other people's blogs, what we thought of the equipment. And it has helped us keep a diary, in a sense, because one of the challenges, you're seeing so much and doing so much that you suddenly can't remember what you saw 3 or 4 weeks ago. Were you in this country, that country? So we write, it's not daily, we tend to write probably every 3 or 4 days when there's a subject of interest that we want to put together. And we've got that because I don't remember 90% of what we did. So I have to go back to the blog now to remember exactly what happened.
James Cargo Motorcycle Shipping sponsors Under the Visor.